Hello, my name is Lowell Bliss, and welcome to this quick refresher video on Peer Consultations. If you found your way to this video, then quite likely you have been trained by the Kansas Leadership Center or by Christar's Aspire Academy. It's also likely that you have registered or are considering registering for what we are calling the Quick Response Innovation Program. Over the next 3 months, we hope to offer hundreds of peer consultations to health leaders worldwide, particularly those working in the global south and among the world's urban poor and village poor during the time of this COVID-19 crisis. If your training is in the distant past, you might be feeling a little rusty, you might be feeling a little underconfident, but don't worry, those who've recently re-engaged peer consultations has told us that it's just like learning to ride a bicycle. And of course, we'll provide all the refresher information, including the format here. And this is a wonderful opportunity actually to explore and to purchase the revised edition of the Kansas Leadership Handbook. In my opinion, it really is a beautiful thing. So your purpose must be clear, and ours is about assisting health leaders with the adaptive challenge that is COVID-19. The funny thing about a familiar graph like this, and this is the one that appears in the Times of India, is that there are known solutions for each aspects of it, right? Doctors and experts know how to treat COVID-19, even though we don't yet have a vaccine. We know how to produce vaccines. We know how to move and adjust the healthcare system capacities. We also have expertise about social distancing and hand washing. We know how to flatten the curve. But to implement those known solutions is an adaptive challenge. And so we have a group of experts who are trained in technical thinking, and suddenly they're facing just grave adaptive challenges for doing their work. And of course, then we add situations like this. This also is from New Delhi. These are day laborers who've lost their jobs, who can no longer pay rent. They're all heading back to the villages in India. And so global health leaders are contemplating tens of millions of deaths, particularly in the global south. And so these same health leaders are calling out for small, quick changes in their thinking and perspective. And they're asking for small, quick action steps that they can implement right away. And of course, that's exactly what peer consultations are designed to consider. So if you're still thinking about volunteering, here's the appeal. Please do. We would say this is your moment. This is a chance to make a contribution to the health of this world. There'll be a couple new things for you in peer consultations the way that they're done. For one thing, they'll be done via Zoom. So we'll have all the technology set up, and you'll be speaking to each other online. The other new thing is that the case presenters really are not trained in the Kansas Leadership Center framework. They don't know the lingo, and so you'll have to be careful either to avoid the lingo, like raise the heat or do a faction map. You'll either have to avoid that lingo or explain it in depth. But those should really be the only two new things for you, and you'll recognize the format quite easily. We'll still be engaging during the course of the peer consultations the observation, interpretation, and intervention circle that you've been trained in, the OII circle. So consequently, we'll be asking good data gathering questions to bolster the observations that are made about behaviors, patterns, and relationships. During the diagnostic brainstorming, we'll want to make that interpretive mind shift, not be satisfied simply with technical interpretations, but also adaptive ones. We want conflictual interpretations in addition to the benign ones. We want systemic interpretations in addition to the individual ones. And then, of course, during the action step brainstorming, that still is about doing small little smart experiments, things that these health leaders can implement in just a couple days even, and what they can learn from as they head back into the OII cycle. We'll send you the refresher packet. You'll have the format at your fingertips, and I'm ready to lead you through it as quickly as I possibly can. Here's our case presenter. You will receive the day before your peer consultation his or her case presentation, and so it'll answer these 4 questions, which will be familiar to you about the background of the problem, why it's important to him or her, what actions have been taken so far, what are questions most like to address during the challenge. You'll recognize the roles as well in the peer consultation, the case presenter for sure. One thing we've made is that we've taken all the roles, timekeeper, note keeper, and we've folded them into the work of the facilitator. That way freeing you up to be just the peer consultant and to rattle off your diagnoses and action steps without distraction. We begin with the first 5 minutes case presentation, and here's a chance for the presenter in his or her own words to identify the adaptive challenge they're up against. So our case presenter might say our clinic has run out of masks, our vendor supply chain is quarantined, our administration has strict regulations regarding reuse of masks, our contract locks us into a single vendor, there's a neighboring NGO but we had a past argument with them and so they're not sharing. All of our funds actually have to go to buy ventilators, not masks. And maybe the case presenter will become vulnerable and admit to some fears that he or she might be having. 5 minutes, we're just listening. In the next 10 minutes, this is our chance to ask questions that are data gathering questions. What don't we yet understand? What observations have we not yet made? We want to position ourselves well for making diagnostic brainstorming. So here's where we ask questions, and hopefully the case presenter will provide short answers. So we might ask, who makes decisions in your clinic? Can, in fact, masks be sanitized for reuse? What's the minimum and maximum number of masks you need? What would happen if you breach the contract with your vendor? Who can patch over the argument with your colleagues? How much trust does the community give the clinic? 10 minutes, we know, isn't a great deal of time. But when it's over, we move on to diagnostic brainstorming. So here we won't have the case presenter turn their back to the audience, but we will ask him or her to turn off their video so we can't see their body language and their faces. Here's our chance to throw out, popcorn out, various interpretations. One interpretation is, another interpretation is, one interpretation is. Different ways of seeing and illuminating an understanding of the case. So here we might hear someone say it sounds like a funding issue, not a supply issue. One interpretation is that the staff may be worried about affecting their families at home. One interpretation, the vendor's contract doesn't seem as binding as the case presenter believes. He sounds deathly afraid of losing his first patient, and that seems to be paralyzing him. Ventilators are the top priority. But actually, maybe the opposite is true. Avoiding new infections is the top priority, not ventilators for treatment. One interpretation is leaders are determined to protect the clinic's reputation more than saving lives. We know that we're after adaptive interpretations, we're after conflictual ones, we're after systemic ones, as well as the others, right? But nonetheless, we're looking for some helpful new ways of thinking. Let me say one word about conflictual interpretations. Our case presenter hasn't been trained up in the OII circle or even in the interpretive mind shift, although I'll be coaching them beforehand about what to expect, and I'll make sure to mention this. Nonetheless, it can be hard to hear conflictual interpretations. We all know that. So a couple things we can do. We can use the language of one interpretation is. So that the case presenter doesn't think that we're saying my interpretation is or the right interpretation is. We could also preface it by saying one conflictual interpretation is, therefore we can signal kind of where we're going with that. And another thing to do with conflictual interpretations is to immediately follow it up with an opposite interpretation. Again, what we'll be trying to present is that, one interpretation is an opinion, two interpretations are a dilemma, but when we can popcorn out three or more, we're really opening up the room for discovery for this person. So that's 15 minutes, and then the next 5 minutes is given to action step brainstorming. Here we are, we're popcorning out short little suggestions. We're not taking time to explain them in depth or to lay out the steps for implementation. We're not defending them, but we're just throwing them out, and so that the case presenter can hear a variety of different things and maybe stimulate his or her own thinking. So, consequently, one person might say, go ahead and breach the contract. Humble yourself and go apologize to your partner NGO. Ask the community to sew masks. Apply to the government for funds. Only buy 2 new ventilators, not 5. Go ahead and grieve that you will have deaths in your clinic. Drive to the capital city yourself to pick up new masks. Whoa, 5 minutes, that's quick, right? And so consequently, we're giving them our best. So then we move on to the 5 minutes of the presenter reflections. And again, I'll try to coach our case presenter on how best to use this time. And even as the facilitator, I'll try to set them up for this time. But here's a chance for them to reflect on what they heard, to identify new interpretations they want to rent, and also what action steps they might take up experimentally in the next few days. So we'll sit back and listen to them. Now, so consequently, this person might say, yes, I'm afraid of my first death. That was very helpful about balancing out ventilators, masks. Doesn't know about masks, whether they can be sanitized, but knows where to find out. Convinced they need to be more complimentary of their encouraging of their staff. He says, I'm not ready to breach our contract, but I can go to and renegotiate it because of the crisis. Maybe they're sitting there, maybe they're thinking, and hopefully they'll say thank you, and thank you for taking notes. And certainly the program is grateful to you and your participation in this peer consultation. The final part of the program, as we all remember, is that 5 minutes of group debrief. We'll skip this because we won't be, meeting again as a team and trying to improve. But in your refresher packet, you'll be reminded of all the things that make for a good peer consultation, about asking important data gathering questions, about not jumping to solutions during the diagnosis time, and of course looking at interpretations from multiple points of view. There's some other things in your refresher packet, text from the Kansas Leadership Center handbook tips. You can either stop the video here or wait for it there, but there are some traps we want to avoid. There are some tips for making this a good experience for them. So thank you for sitting through the refresher. I do hope you'll sign up to be a volunteer. We need you. You can contact me at my email. If you've not yet received the one-pager that explains about the volunteer program, happy to send it out to you. Once you do register, we'll send you your refresher kit. You're on a listserv, and at that point, we'll announce the openings that we have for the next week for peer consultations, and hopefully you'll sign up for as many as you can. Thank you very much.